New tank farm equipment at Massey's, air separation unit destruction at Sanchez continues, non-stop construction of the factory at the build site, and new wall work at the launch site. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's action-packed RGV aerial photography Starbase Flyover Update episode 22. I'm Indnstar, and I'm excited to share some of the amazing things happening at SpaceX's development facility, referred to as Starbase. These photos were taken Friday, October 28th, with some additional ground photos taken later in the weekend. Fasten your seatbelts and enjoy the flight. Alright, let's begin here at Massey's structural test site, where lots of construction has taken place over the last week. Special shout out to Procky for creating these labeled maps for all 4 sites at Starbase. Here's what it looked like in our previous flyover on October 15th. Watch as the slider slowly uncovers the changes visible in this week's flyover from October 27th. The changes are quite noticeable, aren't they? Starting at the booster cryogenic testing station, we can see Booster 11 sitting atop the puckshucker. Though Booster 11 hasn't seen any significant testing since last week, that doesn't mean the rest of the site hasn't progressed. Moving down to the ship cryogenic testing station, we can see that the cryogenic test stand hasn't returned to this site. This is because it remains at Sanchez after delivering Ship 29 to the Rocket Garden on the 13th of October, presumably for storage and further work. Moving on to the building currently under construction, we can see that the prefabricated steel has been going up quickly with most of the outer shell of the building already in place. Looking closely, we can see bridge crane runways in the process of being installed, with one already in place and sections of the other one staged nearby. Also, the mezzanine level we expected to see has been added near the front. We don't currently know the intended use for this building, but like everything at Starbase, I'm sure we will know more as the weeks progress. In the meantime, let us know what you think this building is for in the comments below. Moving to the structural testing cage, we can see that Ship 27's aft section was removed and placed on a staging stand. Though we never saw what happened to Ship 27's aft section after that, we can be sure it was tested and that SpaceX retrieved the data they needed from the test. Over to the left, we can see S26 waiting its turn to be tested in the structural test cage, just as we discussed a few episodes ago. Moving down, we can see the sections that make up the hot stage test article are no longer at Massey's, as they were transported back to the build site where they await an unknown fate. Sliding over to Massey's tank farm, we can see that 2 new sets of pedestals are being constructed, indicating that more tanks destined to join this tank farm are coming soon. A concrete driveway was poured in the front of the liquid nitrogen tank farm, which will surely be a big improvement over the previous dirt road. We can also see that a concrete pad was poured and subcoolers, affectionately called hippos, were placed on 2 of the pedestals in the area. Now you might be wondering, why are they installing subcoolers in this area? Well, this is an interesting question that we don't quite know the answer to. We believe it could be one of 3 options. The first, SpaceX could be moving the spin prime operations to Massey's. Or perhaps SpaceX is constructing a Raptor stand. The third option could be that the supercooled LOX offers a more accurate flight-like test for the cryo puckshuckers, valves, and the plumbing on the airframes. Looking to the top of Massey's now, we notice this area is cleared and leveled. Is this a sign of things to come? What do you think will be placed here? And finally, all the way at the top of Massey's sits the E-Dome, or elliptical dome, which remains at the burst pad since conducting its first cryogenic test on October 20th. Well, that's it for Massey's. Now let's move on to the Sanchez site, where a rather important structure is missing. Here at Sanchez, a new member of the Rocket Garden has arrived, along with a portion of another. Sort of. More on that a little bit later, but first, here's a labeled map of the site for those unfamiliar with this layout. Now that you're familiar with Sanchez, let's compare this photo from the flyover on Sunday, October 15th, with the aerial shot captured in this week's flyover on Friday, October 27th. Hopefully the slowed down slider is more helpful when comparing the 2. Let's get started with the ground fabrication building, shall we? Crews are making good progress applying the roof and side panels. Since the last flyover, the remainder of the left-hand side and the entire center section have been covered. The front face of the building is also complete now. Just one more roof section and the crews will have a dry, climate-controlled location to work in once again after many months of exposure to the elements. Up above the building, we can see electrical conduit from the trench spotted last time inching ever closer to the corner of Sanchez. If we follow the trench in the other direction, we can see it extends even further than before, passing the electrical distribution area and coming to a stop near the water treatment plant, where it meets existing distribution vaults. As anticipated, it appears this trench will be used to supply three-phase power to the tools and other utilities required for this building. Between multiple welders, a bridge crane, and HVAC equipment, this building will need a lot of juice, not to mention the outside work that will be occurring nearby. Now let's slide over to the stand construction area, where some great progress has occurred since the last flyover. Over on the left, we can see a couple of SPMTs on standby in the driveway. These provided some nice foreshadowing for what was coming after the flyover. Taking a look at the nearly completed white stand, we can see the holding arms and at least some of the hold-down clamps have been installed, as seen by the shadows cast inside the ring. It's possible these stands are set up to clamp similarly to the black stands below, which, as we pointed out in the last episode, is much like the OLM using hydraulics. With the touch of a button, boosters could be held in place without crews having to manually attach clamps around the skirt. Remember those safety screen doors we spotted last time, along with the white platform and round service platform that is lowered inside the stand? All three components took a trip over to the build site. We'll show you where they are when we get there. The stand wasn't too far behind, as it turns out, so stay tuned. Just next door, we can see construction of the third white stand is just getting underway. Looking down at the black stands, there isn't much difference that we can see from this vantage point. Aside from the few aesthetically unpleasant hold-down arms that are covered in rust and perhaps the remainder of the hold-down clamps being installed on the stand to the left, it looks like there's still a bit of work to do before these are ready to move. All 20 hold-down arms for the second stand are still waiting nearby for installation. Rounding out this spot, we see another ship transport stand receiving some work next to the black stands. Before we transition to the scrapyard, did anyone happen to notice something else missing in this image? Remember that mysterious set of 6 blast diverters that were sitting here for the last, well, let's just say a long time? They're gone and have yet to be found anywhere else as of right now. Unless they turn up in the future flyover, they won't be diverting anything at Starbase after all this time, sadly. Maybe they're inside the now covered building next door. What a surprise that would be. Moving up toward the scrapyard, we can see the old transport stand that was delivered from KSC earlier in the year has now been scrapped. The remainder of the old nose cone that was present in the last flyover is now gone as well. The mysterious jig lost a few more pieces as it appears. The way it's being taken apart suggests SpaceX may be salvaging some components instead of just scrapping it altogether. Up at the power distribution area, work on the new foundation next to the conduit trench continues. The foundation footings for the walls and the other infrastructure have now been poured, covering most of the conduit that was visible underneath in the last episode. We can see at least some of the conduit is now exiting the slab toward the existing infrastructure next door. Switching angles, we can see the conduit exiting the rear of the slab to the left here connects to the rest of the conduit in the long trench. Also visible is vertical rebar around the outer edge of the concrete pad, evident by the shadows and orange safety cones on top. Based on their alignment with the existing forms, these will be tied into the perimeter wall for the structure. Just over to the right in this image and down below, we can see a supply of rebar at the ready for use in the next concrete pour. Now let's see how the air separation unit teardown is going. We can see crews hard at work breaking up the concrete pedestals that were home to the various cooling tower units and the other components around the pad. Plumbing for the 2 small white tanks to the right of the main tower have been removed, along with the plumbing and racks that were last seen to the left of the tower. The previous location of the cryo dump ring beneath the 3 horizontal tanks has been filled in with concrete now. SpaceX definitely appears eager to get this location emptied out as soon as possible. Will these 3 tanks remain? What do you think is coming for this location once the area is cleared? More rocket garden space or perhaps another inventory tent? Let me know what you think in the comments. Over in the water treatment area, it looks like 2 of the new metal tanks have been covered with tarp. Whether this is to protect what's inside from the weather or what, we're not sure. What we are sure of, however, is the disappearance of a concrete slab beneath the new tanks. Since our last flyover, the concrete slab has been broken up and removed. Could there be more tanks or other process equipment to come for this setup? It certainly appears so. So what's this all about new members showing up at the Rocket Garden? In the early morning hours of October 22nd, under the cover of darkness, the HLS nose cone mock-up made a mad dash for Sanchez from its old home over near the crane yard. It's now resting at the rear of the parking lot behind the Tiki Bar. SpaceX has given visitors an amazing opportunity to see the mock-up up close, possibly even preparing for a presentation, perhaps? As for the other member, our beloved Ship 26 made its return from the launch site just hours after the flyover on the 27th. The RGV cam in front of the Star Factory along Highway 4 was at the ready as the ship crawled toward the build site. After turning down Remedios Avenue, it would come to rest next to Ship 29. Is this the last hurrah? Is the next fire Ship 26 sees that of the cutting torch? Let me know what you think in the comments. That's all for Sanchez. Now let's find out where the booster stand might be headed over at the build site. Now entering the build site where SpaceX is hard at work building multiple ships and boosters as well as their factories. Refer to Procky's map for the various bays and factories as we make our way around the site. Before we check out this week's progress, let's compare this photo from the flyover on Sunday, October 15th with the photo taken on Friday, October 27th. We'll start off as usual at Mega Bay 2's construction site with this shot taken from the back of the build site. You may recall that in our last video, we covered the installation of the bridge cranes and their respective trolleys. This week we can see that they're now completely covered by roof panels and rebar ahead of the concrete pouring to make the floor for Mega Bay 2's office space. But what are the holes on the side for? Spinning over 180 degrees, we see the vertical staircase segments in the shadow of Mega Bay 1, which are still being lifted by both the LR11000 and yellow cranes into Mega Bay 2. Remember how the safety screens, odd-shaped platform, and lifting platform went missing from Sanchez earlier? Well, here we can see the two platforms staged outside of Mega Bay 1. And if we look real close inside the bay, the legs and the safety screens can be seen ready for the platforms and white engine stand to be installed. Soon after this flyover, the lifting platform joined the structure. The final piece of the engine installation stand, the actual mounting ring, was moved into the Mega Bay on Saturday, the 28th of October, completing the structure, captured here on Lab Padre's Rover 1 cam. Meanwhile, Booster 10 is still in the Mega Bay receiving its engines on the first of the newly constructed pair of engine installation stands. Not shown in this image is Booster 12, which is awaiting cryo testing at Massey's, and Booster 13, which still hasn't been fully stacked. We can see Ship 32, which is still being worked on ahead of its stacking onto its common dome, which happened on October 24th. Ship 32 is now 2 sections away from a full stack, with just its mid-lock section and aft section remaining. Speaking of its mid-lock section, we can see it's staged just outside the high bay. Next, let's switch back to this top-down view to take a look at the future expansion of Star Factory. Just like last week, crews continue to dig trenches for the laying of various electrical conduits and wires before covering them back up again. Shifting right, things are a bit more lively with the Star Factory's already completed sections, with roof work almost complete on the non-raised parts, as well as cladding on the sides. Can you see these two trucks on the very left side? They're carrying none other than Star Factory brand new windows. Crews were hard at work installing X-shaped window bracing for these windows this past week, as seen here, captured by RGV's very own build site cam on the 20th. And here's where we usually end the build site segment, but as requested by some in last week's video, we'll cover a couple of changes at the village side of Starbase. First, we can see land clearing has progressed, and a stick frame house is even being constructed in this plot of land. Foundation work can be seen going on in 3 other plots of land where SpaceX employees are expected to live. Moving down, we see a parking lot has appeared, complete with painted lines in the place where the tracking stations used to be. I guess SpaceX had a bit of asphalt left over from the launch site pour, which is where we're going next. But before we head over, just a quick reminder to click the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It's a really big help and supports us getting this type of content out week after week. Thank you so much. Next up at the launch site, to help you get familiarized, here's a labeled map of the launch site. Here's a picture from the last flyover. Now sliding over to the most recent flyover. Starting off over at the suborbital site, we see that work continues on the new power infrastructure to connect the suborbital site to the grid. This will supply 3-phase power to the suborbital site. Remember when the trenches were first dug and conduit laid a few months ago? The primary supply went further along Highway 4 before crossing over to the orbital tank farm. This would ultimately replace the generators they've been using over the years. the new parking lot is finished. This was needed to ensure SpaceX has enough room for all their employees to park safely and can stay off the side of the road. Moving down the new parking lot entrance, we can see a new concrete wall is being built at the road for additional privacy and protection. In addition, this would prevent debris from entering the road, as we saw on the first integrated flight test of Starship. Ship 26 can be seen here less than an hour before its rollback to the rocket garden. The full-scale ship test article was removed from suborbital pad B after its testing campaign seemed successful. Ship 26 performed a pre-burner test leading to its first static fire, which SpaceX confirmed to be a simulated deorbit burn. Ship 26 then rolled back to the production site. Its fate is undetermined. Moving down to the orbital tank farm, not much has changed. We noticed some new pipe racks at the new tank's expansion area. We expect the new pipe racks to be installed where they are ripping up the concrete in front of the pre-existing protecting wall. Slightly to the left, we see piping has been made to the new subcoolers at the CH4 and LOX side of the tank farm. These will connect to cool down the propellant so it can be loaded into the booster or Starship faster in the near future. Ship 25 was destacked from Booster 9 for final flight preps. This could be the last time we see Ship 25 destacked before the flight after what looks to be a successful wet dress rehearsal. And just in case you didn't know, a wet dress rehearsal entails both the booster and ship being filled with liquid oxygen and methane, with a simulated countdown all the way to T-0, with the exception of the rather important booster engine ignition. The only time engines ignite on a full stack will be on launch day. Here's a short time-lapse of the wet dress rehearsal we saw last week from our launch site cam. After Ship 25 was destacked, the hot stage ring was detached from Booster 9, before subsequently being reinstalled on the 28th of October. In the past week, we speculate that one of the grid fin motors has had some issues, so this could revolve around that. After all, the placement of several booster avionics systems within the inner stage necessitates the hot stage ring be removed. And finally, SpaceX capped off testing with a test of the water-cooled steel plate system beneath the orbital launch mount. This is the second ever time the Deluge system was fired with its full complement of water storage tanks. Thanks to Epic Spaceflight's Hoop Cam for capturing this footage. With the conclusion of Ship 25 and Booster 9's wet dress rehearsal, SpaceX is now ready for the next flight test of Starship and Super Heavy. And that's all from the launch site. And that's it for episode 22 of Starbase Flyover Update. Thank you for choosing to fly with RGV aerial photography, and I hope you enjoyed the flight. If you liked what you saw today, please subscribe for more episodes and content so you don't miss out on the new videos each week. I'm Indnstar, and I'll see you next week from 10,500 feet. That's all for now.